Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show to about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Endgame. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we kind of get, a little more insight into the whole Gambia situation. It's like, Elena's like, oh yeah, we were working together now, just like we were working together then. She's like, what? No, you tried to shoot me. And like, Elena kind of making it clear, like, no, I didn't. Like, if I wanted you dead, you would be dead. And now we get context for, like, the moment they showed the bullet not even nowhere, like, in front of Val like that, I was like, she was warning you. Like, I figured that had to be the case, like, and obviously we get the answer later on, but I was like, she like was super impressed, like, oh my God, they're sending you in here. The U.S. is actually doing something. Even to have the bright idea to actually send the woman in to do the job, So the fact is that she was already very interested in Valerie, and that's probably why when the time came with the whole Owen thing, that probably made her go like, oh, you're Valerie's, because she probably took an interest in Val from the very beginning. So she was probably already aware. That's why she probably knew about Owen from the beginning, because the moment he came to her, because wasn't that 2016? I don't remember now, because this might be after the fact. I don't know, because she didn't seem like she recognized Val. So that's why I'm like, didn't that whole thing with, because I'm blanking on the date from last episode. Do correct me in the comments down below. I was thinking it was 2016, but it might have been like 2018 that happened, I believe. I don't remember like that whole thing last episode with Owen, her, and Sergey. But the question then becomes like, either way, like, she didn't recognize Val immediately, so it must be like the Owen stuff hasn't happened yet. But I think that might have been why she knew about Owen, because like, oh no, I found out about your wife. I find her so interesting, so I looked into her, and then I found out about you. So when you presented yourself to me, I was like, oh, let's see where this goes. So that could be why she let that whole thing happen, because she found out who Owen was. It's like, oh my God, I'm so impressed by your wife that I'm excited to see where this situation between us goes, because she is trying to paint the picture like, right, if Owen's working with me, maybe he has a good reason that maybe we aren't the bad guys. I mean, look at the work we've done. I mean, hell, even later throughout the show, we do see that people kind of go, hey, Elena Fedorova might not be that bad of a guy. Villain or hero. It's like she exposed some really bad stuff. Yeah, went about it a anti-hero way, but it's like, yeah, and Valerie's like, no, we're not about to let that happen. We're not about to let her be like some folk hero in the public view. We're going to show her to be the bad guy that she is. So I think that's going to be a continuing interesting thing. I don't think, I mean, obviously it served her purposes doing the whole thing publicly, but I don't think she wants to be worshipped as a hero. It was just for that sake. I don't think she's going to make such a public thing again, but it could just be the whispers of like, oh yeah, all these people getting exposed and taken down, like, oh, is it Elena? Did she do this? Oh my God, she's taking down all these corrupt people. Like, oh my God, recognizing the evil within your own country and stuff. So maybe it'll play into that, but I feel so bad for Doak this episode, because he is such a hard ass, but especially when he gets into it later on, you kind of understand. You're a little more sympathetic, being like, all right, I see why you are the way you are. You still come off like such a tool and such a douchebag, but I get why you're so douchey. But the fact is that he was trying everything to be like, right, we're not going to be a step behind this time. We're playing smart. Sadly, they were 30 seconds behind everyone from that bank who ended up escaping. So he wants Valerie to look into all this stuff. It's like, right, we need this win. It's like, you need the win more than she does. She's the one coming out on top in this whole situation. You're the one that kind of keeps losing. So you're kind of hoping there'll be a little bit more collaboration despite your beef and your issues, because you need the win. Because every time you're turning around, especially after the debacle last episode, it's like everything's kind of blown up in your face. So you need this win. So, but he ends up getting stuck inside of a trap, and like there's concussion mines and stuff. I guess that was I think that speaks volumes. That's so good that technically there probably was only one concussion mine. It was to make them think like, oh my God, if we get close to this, like something's going to happen because of the lasers and stuff. And they think like, oh, it's going to set off something else, so we need to be careful where we step. It's like, no, the whole thing was, it was just psychological warfare. By setting off that one concussion mine, you think like there's others there. And oh my God, like you just assume lasers, like you assume the worst, because like, right, you got too close to the laser before a concussion mine went off. Like, who's to say there are more so you're worried the entire time, even to the point that Elena's like, oh, it's dope. Like the only way you're going to get past this is was like blood and like no tears and sweat. It's because like, oh, we're going to make you sweat a little bit and be like, because like, all right, who's the next person that Elena's trying to expose? And Dokes is like, is it me? But he's like, I've got nothing to hide. And he's like, all right, eventually he comes out about something that's baddish, but it's not really on him. It was more about his superior. He was basically told to let this kid go who was a part of some like drug operation selling fentanyl. But he did. And it's like, yeah, this young kid, don't let it ruin his future. That kid would go on to eventually make his own business, and 30 people would die because of it. And because of that, Doke's like, I know people might see me as like a hard ass, but I'm only like that because I got it. I didn't go forward with it like I should have at one point in time, and so many people died. So for him, it's like, I can't be wrong again, even though you've been wrong so many steps of the way. But it's just he's trying to like be perfect. Like, so like there's some level of like, once again, you can feel sympathetic of understanding like, right, your motivation is you want to get the bad guys. You have such a strong sense of justice because you don't want to get it wrong. You want to get it right. You want to make sure everything sticks. I get that. I can back that. But once again, doesn't take away from you coming off a little douchey. So obviously, this episode also confirmed those two that were speaking between like Bank 1 and Bank 2. It turns out like, right, they are a couple. In fact, home dude Louis ended up buying like an engagement ring for her. And it's like, oh, so because the way they were talking, it's because they do seem like, at first, that's what I was wondering. Is that why these are people who rally behind Elena so much? Because I'm curious, are they people who are like Elena? They were screwed over by something terrible and they're united in her cause to expose corruption, that you have to do a little evil for the greater good type of thing. Like the fact is that they're so willing to follow her, even to the point Louis is like, yeah, I might even be willing to die for her. So I'm wondering, does that kind of play into that element to it? That's why I almost felt like some of these people might not. Well, it seems like Louis well trained in certain regards, so the other lady too. So it's like not like they're ordinary people, but I'm curious, were they already a couple beforehand? Like, you know, does Elena seek out people kind of like her and Sergey, or do they become like this because working together with Elena they ended up finding each other? I'm curious, like which, you know, what came first when it came to their dynamic in their relationship. But I was actually surprised with the whole recording thing, because I was thinking like what it was going to reveal is that like, oh yeah, Elena like fired that shot. Like I thought that's the thing she was missing, but they kept being the big picture. Like she didn't realize what the shot situation represented until Elena kind of pointed it out. But it turns out in the grand scheme of things, those guns they were using were American guns, which even she's like, yeah, I don't deal in American guns because I didn't want to take the chance I might attract like the CIA and stuff like that. So she usually handles guns like that are more like international based and not US based. So I thought that was fascinating. So it's like, right, if that's the case, if I didn't sell them those guns, how did they get those American guns? And it turns out the bank guy, who's, because obviously from the very beginning, Valerie was like, the fact is that Elena chose this bank. There has to be more to it. Problem is, Dope kept being like, no, follow the other guys, because he's so adamant about like, I need a win, because them slipping out of his grasp was kind of something on his fault, so he needed to kind of make up for it. So he was so adamant about trying to get his win, he wasn't paying attention to the big picture. He constantly gets blindsided by the big picture because he doesn't listen to Valerie when he should. Because he's like, I'm the superior officer, like, I know what I'm doing. And it's like, no, you keep stumbling your way through this. The only reason why you're making it forward is because Valerie, which I'm sure for him, it rubs him the wrong way, because it's like, yeah, it feels like I'm set up to fail and Valerie's set up to win. But it's like, no, it's just Elena knows what Valerie's capable of. And it's like, I know who you can be and how extraordinary you are. So I'm sitting back and I'm setting everything in motion for you to figure out, because I know you will figure it out. And I need you to figure it out because I need you to come to it in your own. If I explain everything to you, you're going to be like, no, that's crazy. Giving it to you piece at a time, piece by piece by piece by piece, you will eventually start piecing it together yourself, and you come to that conclusion on your own. And it means a lot more. It means differently when you're like, okay, so if I came to this on my own, you might have given me the breadcrumbs, but if you explain everything to me, I'm like, no, you're crazy. Coming to it and figuring it out on my own, I'm like, okay, so you're not that crazy. So Because we do potentially later on when the bank guy gets taken down, because apparently for the past 10 years he's been doing like some money laundering type of stuff on like an international scale. He's the reason why the Ghana not Ghana, the Gambia situation happened was because of him. It's like, right, they used those American weapons to kill a whole bunch of villagers. They were torturing those NGOs, so it's like all that kind of falls on you. So, but then we find a photo in his office that shows all 4 people that have been taken down, including this bank guy. Because I even love, like, the only reason why they found all this is because they were backed against the wall and the laser wasn't going to do anything. But the moment, like, they backed up against the wall, they found the safe. It was like, right, it was to push you there. Once again, it's like for you to kind of inadvertently find it on your own. Because if I just pointed you there, it won't mean as much. It's just part of the game. It also probably, like, diverts their attention. So it's like, right, while you're focused on all of this and all this is happening over here, I'm already getting you set up to pay attention to this while everything else is being set up groundwork-wise. Because the only person from Bank 1 that got caught was Louis, like kind of one of her lieutenants. So like the people who are at the charge of each of the banks is probably one of her lieutenants. Like obviously the one from Bank 1 and Louis and his SO are like probably like 2 of the lieutenants and maybe the other people connected to the banks. You know, we'll see. Or kind of other lieutenants as well. Like, of course, she'd only lead the most trustworthy of people to kind of lead the charge, you know, while she's away. I do love the element of the constant back and forth between the director and Elena about like, right, you hurt one of my people, and he's like, right, she's getting so far under my skin, I'm starting to itch. But it's like the back and forth of like, yeah, you hurt my people, it's gonna be a bad day for you. And she's like, oh, trust me, director, the same thing applies to you. So, and it does turn out she is reading his lips, because he's like, yeah, blow up Louis' head, and she's like, no, and he was like, so she can read lips, and she's kind of like, look at you being cheeky. She's like, you got me. So that was fascinating. But I also love that the people who work for her like Louis. It's cheeky because it's like, oh, what's on the phone? He's like, oh, selfies. You know, I'm a little bashful, embarrassed about it. So that's all that's up there. So like the fact is they can be so cheeky too is so interesting. But circling back to it, that bank guy had a photo of all 4 people who've been taken down, along with 3 other people in the picture. Now, even like Valerie's like, are these 3 your next target? Or at the very least, are these 2 your next target? We'll get to the third person. But it's like, are these your next target? She's like, are they corrupt pieces of crap? Well, you have to find out. It's up to Valerie Turner to figure that out. So that's the question. Like, are those the future targets? Because notice there's one person that's also in that picture, but his face is hidden. So the question is like, right, could the other 2 be innocent, but the person here whose face is hidden isn't, like, what's going on there? So that the fact is they hid that person's face makes me feel like that's going to be a big mystery in its own right. Maybe it's not like a direct correlation of like that person's responsible, but maybe they'll be useful in finding some information that could be used later on. We'll see. But I love the conversation of what are they watching, and then what does Elena say? She says the beginning of our story. So initially, I was wondering if they were watching, but I think that was within the past 10 years, because that was like from the previous administration, I think, election-wise and stuff like that. So I'm thinking it's not about her childhood. Maybe there's some correlation there. Maybe there's some connection there. I'm thinking they're watching what's happening with the church, her wedding day. I think that's what they're watching. I think that was a government-sanctioned, like, the heads of different people came together for that purpose. I think that's what that was. I think the God, I'm blanking on the names. The bad guys they set up last episode, they made it seem like it might have been them, which it could have been, but that could have still been like a U.S. sanction thing. Like, right, let's kind of get some plausible deniability. So we set it up so they're the ones who did it, but we're the ones kind of payrolling it so that it happens. So there might be something there, but I think that's what video they were watching was like the moment Sergei lost his entire family. So did Elena, because his mom was like a mom to her, and she, like, when her dad died, I think that was probably the last of her family, so she was kind of alone. She even references that her and Valerie are similar when it comes to the whole dating someone you care about. So it seems like her and Sergey, like, were best friends growing up and eventually became like a couple. So it's those two being two sides of the same coin runs even deeper. That's why Elena takes such an interest in her. It's like, you and me, they're so much similar to us. We both, that's why we make the great team that we do. So that's what I think that's kind of hinting at and stuff like that. But I also love that Valerie figured out, like, it's like, right, like, this phone is making some kind of, like, it's sending some version of, binary code, and that's how she's getting this information. So, like, this phone, like, it's all going to, like, one specific number, and it's like, she's like, what is that? So that she's getting the information, and Valerie figures it out by texting the number, and she's like, right, the balance of scales have kind of evened out a little bit more, Elena, which maybe Elena accounted for that. She said, you'll probably catch me slipping at one point in time, but not yet. And she's waiting for Valerie, because she's like, oh, you'll eventually catch up, Valerie. Now, has Valerie caught up? I don't know. She's taken a step in the right direction, but we don't know how big of a step this was. She might still be 5 steps behind, and this was like, what she feels like is a giant step might actually only be like half a step. You never know in the grand scheme of things. So, and circling back to Doak, like, obviously the director's like, hey, like, I get it. Everything, that terrible thing that happened when you were a younger agent and stuff like that, it made you into the good person that you are. And so he's saying, like, hey, Valerie's more the field agent, so I should be here. But it's like, no, you should probably start listening to Valerie. And it's like, what, sir? He's like, well, it sounds like a demotion. He was like, no, Doak, it's reality. The fact is, she is our best chance at unraveling all this, because every step of the way, you didn't listen to her. She was right. We could have exposed all this sooner if you had listened to her and say, like, oh, let's look into this Gambia thing a little bit more. You didn't want to listen because, once again, so desperate for a win. He's just like, yes, sir. And just as he's walking by Valerie, Valerie and Elena, he's just like, I will destroy you. And it's like, oh, and Elena's like, oh, he's having a rough day. It's like, yeah, kind of everybody was. So, because like I said, even last episode, Anthony kind of got more on board, because he was like, right, even saying this episode, it's like, right, your instincts about this is good. Like, you know her better than anyone else. You're able to get in her head a lot better than anyone else. Or maybe the question is, Elena's just really good at getting in your head. Either way, it almost seemed like it almost seemed like Elena didn't care that Owen gave her that information. So part of me's like, I guess it was all part of the plan. Like, because it was like, oh, so was Owen doing that on his own? It's like trying to give her a leg up. It's like, no, Owen gave her that because it was important to this case. Like, every bit of information is revealed at a certain time because it needs to be. So it's like, right, she discovered the flash drive, all that noise on it, knowing it was related to Gambia, and this situation ended up being heavily tied to that. So Owen giving her that 4-leaf clover wasn't just his idea. That was part of the plan. Because you'd think Elena would be like more upset, like, oh, like, it's like, no, you accounted for it. It's like, either you accounted for it because you knew it was in the realm of possibility, or it's like, no, you told Owen to do that. And it wasn't, because I was thinking like, oh, it's like a wink and a nod that Owen gave her. I don't think it was. I think it was calculated part of the plan. Maybe not. We'll see. Because Sergey was like, oh, did you give her like any nods or anything like that? And he was like, no. So either that was him lying about the 4-leaf clover, or it could be a byproduct of he was saying like, right, I gave her the 4-leaf clover, the clue, but it's not beyond, it's not any more than what you wanted me to give her type of thing, So we'll see. Speaking of Owen and Sergey, obviously catching up with them in prison, and Sergey's buddy who knows him is like, yo, the fact is you're here pretending to be dead. He's like, oh, I know you're not Sergey. It's like, shut up. If you know who he is, and you're like, but he's thinking like, oh, there must be a reason why you faked your death. You got to be here. He's like, whatever you're doing, if you were my buddy Sergey, I'd be asking to be a part of it. So it's that whole thing of like, he's seeing this as an opportunity. And it's just kind of like, all right, I got to deal with him. Like, obviously the whole conversation about ferrets and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, my dad waited out with a shotgun and a hammer. And it's like, cool, because like the ferrets, wake up them in the like chicken coop and the devastation they cause and stuff. So Owen's like, right, so you want to handle it that way? He was like, no, I don't want it to be, because Owen's like, right, that'll get bloody, messy. You could end up in, solitary confinement. You could end up getting transferred. It's like, dude, we just need 6 more days. So this is all going down in a couple days. Like, it's going to be like the resolution to all of this, essentially. Or at very least, we're entering the quote unquote end game of it all. I guess it's kind of like maybe the justification that he's trying to get across. And so part of me's, so it's interesting to know, like, this all comes down to like a couple days. So they get rid of him by like making him sick. It's like, right, he'll be in the infirmary at least a week. Yeah, that's all we need. They need at least 6 days for things to play out. We'll see whether Valerie getting her quote unquote leg up, balancing the powers of scale, which I think it's interesting because that was kind of the same thing Doak had said about, like, right, him and Valerie. So it's interesting that Valerie's saying the same thing about her and Elena. But whether or not that kind of throws a wrench in things, or like I said, is it that realm of the word I'm trying to find, the word I'm trying to look for, it's within the realm of failure, where it's like, all right, we already calculated this into the plan, so even if she does get a leg up, it's like, right, we're already prepared for it. It's within the confines of what's to be expected, so it's not that big of a deterrent. It's not that big of a detriment to the plan, so a lot of fascinating stuff. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.